Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have a very exciting guest today. In fact, I feel a little giddy, and so I cannot wait to get her introduced. So, what I'm going to do is say hello to Jamie, my
Hello.
sister, and let her take it from here.
Hello. We are very happy to have Dr. Claire Wilcox here with us today. Dr. Wilcox is an addiction psychiatrist and also a former internist and has worked in a variety of clinical settings, including eating disorder treatment facilities, addiction treatment centers, and general psychiatric practice. So, in addition to her addiction psychiatrist title, she's also a general psychiatrist. Is that right, Dr. Wilcox?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure we make that distinction. It's important.
Mm.
Dr. Wilcox is also adjunct faculty at the University of New Mexico and an associate professor of translational neuroscience at the Mind Research Network, where she's studied the brain chemistry of addictive disorders and the effects of addiction treatment on brain function. She is the author of the textbook Food Addiction, Obesity, and Disorders of Overeating, an evidence-based assessment and clinical guide. That was released in 2021. And her brand new self-help book is called Rewire Your Food Addicted Brain, Fight Cravings and Break Free from a High Sugar Ultra Processed Diet. Both are available for purchase at major retailers. And I see that your latest book also has an Audible version as well. So if you prefer to listen to your books, folks, you've got that option. She is a member of several committees that advocate for recognizing food addiction and has her own personal story of food addiction. She's also written for The Hill, the Santa Fe Reporter, Science in the News, New Mexico Wilderness Alliance, Psychology Today, among others, and is an MFA candidate in fiction at the Institute of American Indian Arts. You can find out more about Dr. Wilcox on wilcoxmd.com, and we'll have all that linked in the show notes. Dr. Wilcox, we're very happy to have you here. And I think that one of the, again, just learning about the idea of the brain science of how our brains are wired to respond to ultra processed stimuli, whether it's alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, media, all of that is, if you think about it, ultra processed. And whether we're consuming it visually or we're consuming it, orally or we're consuming it, auditorily, all of those things, how our brains react, I think is what discerns the label of addiction or not. It's really around the addictive response in the brain. And I'm sure we're going to dive deeper into that. And I'm so happy to have you here. The one of maybe a foundational question that I'd love to talk with you about, because you do have an addiction background, is your perspective on the difference between food addiction and eating disorders.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as you mentioned in the bio, thank you for that, reading that. And by the way, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me, you guys. It's really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question because and so in the new book, that the more recent book that came out, I have a whole chapter devoted to diagnosis of food addiction. And I think it's really important, and it's something that's pretty under recognized, I think, in both the food addiction treatment realm. There are a lot of people that are treating food addiction, even though it's not an official diagnosis, because we've seen that, oh, certain foods are addictive. And so let's move forward and figure out ways to help people that do that. There's been people treating food addiction for a long time. But yeah, amongst the food addiction treaters and amongst eating disorder treatment providers, as well, there's just a lack of understanding of the other camp. And so I think it's really important. And a lot of people have both disorders. So a lot of people have both an eating disorder and a food addiction. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what's been coming out lately in the new research. So maybe just stepping back a little bit, we have the DSM as a psychiatrist, we rely in psychiatry on the DSM to make diagnoses. That's the diagnostic and I can't even say it, the diagnostic and statistical manual. And
Do that three times.
yeah, exactly. I always struggle over that one. And there are a set of criteria to meet, criteria for an addictive disorder. So it's called a substance use disorder is the broad category.
Yes.
And then there are criteria for various eating disorders, and there are several. And and basically what we've found is that, well, maybe take a step back. We don't have any sort of ultra processed food addiction or sugar addiction in the DSM yet. My hope is that that's going to make it in. There's a whole backstory on that. But if you apply those criteria for a substance use disorder to ultra processed food slash high sugar food, really the studies show that the same criteria apply to people, in relation to that people eat or sort of relate to sugar and ultra processed food. Some people, 15% of people relate to sugar and ultra processed food in the same way that people relate to
Yes.
alcohol and other drugs of abuse, right?
Sure.
And
Sure.
so you can meet those criteria. And there's a diagnosis in the eating disorders. There's several diagnoses, but one of them is called binge eating disorder, which is also basically, it involves a lot of things, but one of them is binge eating large quantities of food, feeling out of control with food. There's a lot of overlap in the symptoms for binge eating disorder and substance use disorder.
Yes.
And there's a lot of, I'm getting really into the weeds here. There's a lot of there's a lot of similarity between the eating disorders and the substance use disorders, and people are finding that there's overlap, but they are not one and the same, right?
Mhm.
So not everybody with a binge eating disorder has a food addiction. Not everybody with a food addiction meets criteria for a binge eating disorder.
Sure.
And so they're related and overlapping, but distinct. And kind of one of the key differences basically is that an eating disorder, we understand it derives from not eating enough healthy, it derives from restriction. So restricting, not eating enough healthy, not eating enough calories, limiting, and then what that causes is a rebound binge eating. Whereas an addiction results from flaring of the sort of the addictive brain chemistry, which drives people to be out of control for that reason. So there's there's out of controlness in both diagnoses, but the etiologies are understood to be slipped. So that's kind of how they're distinct.
Could it be
And it's
related?
important because, yeah, so it's an important distinction because of how the treatment is focused, the treatment, how we prescribe treatment. So for example, in eating disorders in general, what we do is say, eat enough food and don't restrict your food, which is all great for a food addiction food plan, in my opinion. But they also say, note all foods in moderation. So do not remove any particular foods from your food plan. They encourage learning how to eat a cookie in moderation. They encourage learning how to eat ice cream in moderation. And
For
in
some people that works, and for others it's kryptonite.
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure.
And so for people with a food addiction, what food addiction proponents believe is that that is not a helpful solution. And for me, it was not a helpful solution. And so for many of us, that was not a helpful solution.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the part of
I
that
hear
that
you.
works great is the eating, in my opinion, eating enough healthy food. I mean, to fill our bodies with lots and lots of vegetables, lots and lots of protein, not to be too skimpy on the fats, maybe the whole grains, depending on where you are, what your food plan ends up being. But to the removal of that particular problem food is really a key part of recovery for
Sure.
people with a ultra processed high sugar food addiction.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was going to get at was, is it substance related, right? In the sense of, folks that would be diagnosed with food addiction are diagnosed that way because they have those substance like foods, chemical laden foods in their diet versus folks that don't. But it sounds like you said, that sometimes there's some overlap and sometimes there's not. So thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying.
Yeah,
Very well.
I love that. Sometimes I wonder about myself a little bit. I've been off of sugar for about 4.5 years and try to be pretty much all ultra processed food free. Sugar is my main drug of choice. So if I have flour in any way, it doesn't, I mean, I'll have it and move on. I won't think much about it. But
Mhm.
something that made me even think about this yesterday is I was going to see someone in the hospital, and I knew that someone else was going to be bringing them the big bag of greasy, ultra processed food, the hamburgers and French fries and stuff like that. And so I was psyching myself up. I ate my dinner, I drank my water. I felt, okay, I'm good. I'm bracing myself. I just had so much anxiety about going into this. Evening times are, for most people, that more wobbly time of the day, and I don't like to be out in the evening, and I certainly don't like to be put in that position. And I think I just had myself so anxiety. But going into it, I thought I had prepared and done all my homework, and I got there. And of course, they're digging into their stuff, and I'm smelling it and seeing it. And then they brought the hospital tray in of food. And I'm like, oh, I'll just look. And nobody wanted it. And I'm like, well, that's free food. Let me just look. Maybe I'll take something home or something. I opened up, and before I knew it, I was taking a bite of the tuna fish croissant. And I kept going. I'm like,
Right.
why did I do that? I haven't done anything like that, and I
Right.
don't know how long. I have no idea. So would that be somebody
Yeah.
with a binge eating disorder? Because I certainly wasn't hungry. I'd just eaten. Or is it an eating
Right.
disorder? Why would someone do something like that?
So I think in your case, it depends. It would depend on your history. So, to know whether or not somebody has a binge eating disorder, have to sort of meet a set of criteria like, I don't know, like over, I never remember these criteria. I always look them up. But over the last, month, have you had 3 episodes of binge eating per week where you felt out of control
Oh,
and you ate much more than was normal? So, it's sort of like
three per
how
week. Wow.
yeah, and other criteria too, like usually there's an impairment in function criteria, things like that. So, in your case, it would sort of depend on what your history was, like why you quit eating sugar in the first place, like that kind of thing.
Oh,
But
yeah, definitely. Once I started, I could not stop. And I only
yeah,
used it as a drug. I never used it for anything other than I was reading something that was in our notes about I would have rather had the sugar than connect with people.
yeah, right. I saw that. Yeah, that was a really neat quote.
Mhm.
I mean, I completely relate to that too myself. Like I had the exact
Oh, I can't wait to
same
hear your story. I
experience.
do want to
Yeah.
hear your story.
Yeah.
Maybe we
Um,
should jump over that way too. Just to kind of,
sure.
how did you get into this field? And I know that you do have a personal connection to this work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's soup. So I ended up like a lot of people with a food addiction history, I have my own like other substances addiction history. So I stopped drinking when I was in my late 20s and um
What was
was
that
up
just
to a three
because?
pack a day smoke.
Okay,
Oh, because I did it on my own, but it was too much. Like I did not, I didn't have like a top down, like got in trouble sort of thing. It was sort of on my own, but my life was pretty unpleasant and I was drinking a lot and it's in the family
sure.
and things like that. And anyway, and so I ended up going to AA meetings for that and got a lot of like support and was just like finally able to make that change. It took a while, like with any of these things, it takes a while for us to make these
Oh yeah.
changes. And so I stopped drinking. And then and that took a little bit. The smoking, I was smoking when I was 18, by when I was 15, and I was trying to quit from the age of 18. I did not quit smoking until I think I was 37. So, I mean, that was a bear. It was so bad. And that was like the hardest thing I've quit, and I cannot believe I've quit. I mean, that just amazes me. But I, stop started. And meanwhile, when I quit drinking, it was like the sugar, and I'd always like kind of binge ate a little bit, but then the sugar just turned into my substitute substance.
Yeah, I've seen it
And
hundreds of times.
Yeah, and so, and it was so, I mean, I was already in training to be a psychiatrist at that point, and it's great that I wasn't drinking, right? Like that's good. But the sugar was there and it was isolating and it was unpleasant and I felt so crazy and out of what is wrong with me? I'm so crazy, I'm out of control. Like,
Mhm.
and just like really battled with this idea that I was like, I think I'm addicted. I went to OA meetings and people said that you can be addicted to food, but then the other voice in my head was like, no, you can't be addicted because nobody, sugar isn't addictive. It's just something you eat and it's just a food and you need to eat to live. And nobody in your world says they're addicted to sugar. Like none of the doctors around you talk about being addicted to sugar. Everybody rolls their eyes when you bring up addiction to sugar. It's just like it was not validated in my world and by the people around me. And so I fought that really hard. And then, but when I was finally able to let go of it, like despite trying every solution I could find, like I kept maple syrup like lightly in my food plan for like 5-ish years. And for whatever reason, I was able to get away with that. But I stopped eating all the other sugar and it was like night and day. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, I can eat normally. I'm not thinking about, like, I stopped obsessing about like bread. You know what I mean? Like now I eat bread. It's maybe a little problematic, but it's not terrible. And, like for me, it was like stopping the sugar was the real night and day change.
Mhm.
So, for me, I'm like, wow, this is just I mean, this is a substance thing.
Yeah,
Pure and simple for me and for many people, I think too. So, but it's
sure.
so hard to let go of it if you're addicted and make that leap. And I mean, for me, it just took so much, it took so much internal fighting. Those justifications were really loud and they were fueled by the environment in which we live, which is like sugar is not addictive. The environment says, no, why can't you just eat one cookie? What's wrong with you? There's something wrong with
Mhm.
you that you can't eat one cookie. So,
Mhm.
so that was kind of my personal story. And anyway, so I was already doing addiction psychiatry. I was already fascinated with addiction in the brain, just reading the neuroscience. So I got in, I did research on that. I was amassing all these articles on food addiction in my computer. And I thought, God, I need to write a textbook about this because it's all here, and I kept, finally like put it all together, wrote a textbook. I kind of had like I don't like to use I'm not going to use the word relapse in relation to food, and that's another question because I think it implies that recovery has to be sort of like a black and white thing. I think with food, it's a lot harder to make it black and white than it is with smoking, where you're like, I'm not going to smoke anymore. With food, you're like figuring out what's my addictive problem, what's my addictive substance in the food
Sure.
realm, like what is it? But when I when I ended up kind of struggling a little bit, I hooked into the Food Junkies podcast, listened to that, was like, wow, this is an amazing podcast. Like, I
Mhm.
am not alone. It's not just me and my textbook and these PDF articles on my computer, like, and the occasional OA meeting. Like, this is actually like way bigger than that. They have
Yeah.
brought a
Yeah.
lot of people together and done a beautiful job of it.
Mhm.
And so,
We-
yeah, it was just like a book needs to be written from the textbook for the lay public that tells people what to do. Like,
Right.
it'll be great when the public health efforts respond, but they're going to take 10, 20, 50 years. I mean, it's going to take a long time for that stuff to change. And
For sure.
so it's going to take, so I think meanwhile, we need to have a solution for people like us that are just like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do? Because my doctor's not going to tell me they're not going to focus, the regular world is not, it's getting way better, but people are getting a lot more awareness of this, but
Yeah, the last 10 years, it's skyrocketed in awareness.
I
So
think so
totally.
too.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about rewiring, and you
Mhm.
use the word rewire in the title of your book. So when you, and I've heard somebody say, well, you just need to rewire those addicted pathways in, your, okay, I'll just do that. So for someone that hears that rewiring and they're like, wow, well, how do I rewire my addictive neural pathways? Where do you start? How do
Yeah.
you make it kindergarten level for someone that is already probably in a very overwhelmed state to begin
Oh my
with,
gosh,
and
I
they're just
know.
going to go rewire some addicted neural pathways. So talk about what that looks like literally on a day-to-day basis. Break it down to simple.
Yeah, sure. And we'll focus, I mean, there's slightly different responses depending on the substance that we'd be talking about. But let's
Mhm.
say we're focused on, sugar and ultra
Yeah.
processed food for the sake of
Yes.
this meeting.
Yes.
And I mean, for all of them, I would say compassion is sort of a primary foundation, because beating up, this is not us. This is not a problem where, we screwed up, we made a mistake, there's something, there is not a brokenness. It is just literally the substance plus our brain doesn't get along. And that is pretty much all it is. So and it's going to be a little hard to change. But the healing is totally possible. I believe that now, and I've had lots of times where I didn't believe that. So I can
Oh,
tell you that it is totally possible. You agree? Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just I went, oh, because that I was surprised to hear you say that there were times that you're like, no way, I can't do this.
Oh, yeah. No, because I kept quitting and going back and quitting and going back. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. And
it's
is
just
is
like nuts.
is that the biggest problem? Is
Yeah.
people believing I can do it? You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
that is
Right.
the biggest problem.
Like
Is
thinking like I can eat the one cookie sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
or that I could ever even get over this
Oh,
hurdle.
yeah. Yeah.
That could, I mean, when I started, stop. But when I finally had my first success with being sugar free at an event, I'm like, whoa, I had
Yeah.
no idea I could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do it again. You know what?
Yeah.
I think I'll try it one more time and see what happens to make sure that wasn't just a fluke.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
So
Yeah.
I interrupted about the simple steps to rewire your brain. Go
Yes. Yes.
ahead.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. So I would say that some of the key things beyond the compassion and just like patience and accepting that it might take, it's probably not going to be tomorrow that you're going to wake up and be like done with sugar. Like that's just the reality, unless you are, and then great,
Mhm.
that's great.
Yeah.
But I think, just from like starting just with the what to eat category, by changing what it is we are putting in our mouths, we will start to rewire the brain. So that's just there are a few
I
categories,
love
but
that
that's
simple
category
statement.
one. Yeah,
Hmm.
category one. And there's two parts. There's several. I think I put three in the book, but I'm going to just give two parts to that here. This is just for what we put in our mouth. One is getting rid of, and this is really hard, but getting rid of or significantly cutting back of the foods to which you are addicted or have an addictive relationship.
Yeah.
And that might mean for many of us, it's sugar, which
Hmm.
seems really, really big when you're looking at it from afar. But when you're actually doing it, once you learn to like, it takes time. You have to like read labels and figure out what foods have sugar in them, and kind of get it. And it may be fits and starts. But once it gets clear what those foods are, and I have a 262 types of sugar document that's linked to in my book that Clarissa Kennedy included me
She's
on,
good.
which is
Yeah.
beautiful. So she's so good. And
Yes, yes.
their Sweet Sobriety is their treatment program, and
Mhm.
they did great work
Mhm.
there. But she yeah, so like looking at that list, studying it, kind of being like, okay, I'm not gonna eat, like that means honey. Meant it for me. Like I tried the whole honey, keep eating honey thing. That was not gonna work for me.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm-mm.
and yeah, I was like, I'll overeat anything with honey in it. And
Hmm.
so the and then the second part of the changing what you eat, and this is rewiring the brain as well, is eating enough healthy food. And that means, vegetables, variety, high protein, like fats are, usually pretty good depending on the person. And just really feeding the brain and not starving it of
Ooh, I
calories,
like it that way.
right? Because studies show that if the brain is deprived of calories, if the brain doesn't get enough nutrients, either of those, if the brain is wanting, that
Mhm.
it will basically flare all the addiction circuitry. So it will
All the
make the
pathways. Yep.
brain much more sensitive to cues in the environment that are, that trigger you, or
Thank you for
it'll make,
saying that.
yeah, like hunger will fuel any addiction.
I
And
can't tell you
yeah,
how many people I've coached in this recovery world of food use disorder recovery world, and I have talked to so many people, and they would be, on the coaching session beating themselves up. Oh, I had this food, and oh, I had that food, and oh, I can't do it. And I was like, hold on. Tell
yeah,
me about yesterday. Tell me about today. Did you move more? Did you
yeah,
think more? Did you have
yeah,
a stressful event? Did you go to the gym and do something new, this week? What chances are there is nothing wrong with this shame spiral that you're having, because it's typically usually they're underfed,
yep,
and they
totally,
don't even know it, and they don't even
totally,
need to.
totally. Yeah, and it's such a learning process to figure out what our cues are. I mean, that also takes time, right? So, a lot of
Yeah.
people frame relapses as a learning opportunity. And I think that's a great way to look at it, because it isn't like we're going to wake up one day and know, like, oh, stress is my trigger. And like, I started to realize, like, oh, there's one type of sourdough bread. And sorry if I'm triggering people, that like from a particular bakery. And like, if that is in my house, if my partner buys that bread and he puts it in the toaster, the smell of that toasting
Yeah.
makes me nuts. And it took me a while to realize what a trigger that was. Like, I just, because
Mhm.
we're like running around all day and doing 100,000 things. It's just, we don't know what those triggers are. We aren't as mindful
Mhm.
of our worlds. We aren't mindful all the time. And so learning what those are, a relapse can be a real good opportunity to be like, oh my God, it was that every time I have a meeting with my boss, like, or
Yeah,
whatever it is,
yeah.
then my craving goes crazy. So yeah, totally agree. So yeah, so that's one part of the rewiring, and I think it's a really, really important part for food addiction is feed ourselves, feed our brains, and get rid of at the same time, sort of remove the problem fueling addictive substance.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other parts, I sort of break it into three categories in the book, but are essentially like I argue that the addictive circuitry is kind of in three different, it's chapter 3, 4, and 5. So 3 is conditioning, and I'll go into each of these. 4 is stress reactivity, emotionality, those kind of networks. And the fifth, chapter 5, is impulse control and decision making. So sort of the higher order brain thinking. And all three of those circuits are awry in any addiction, right? So
Mm.
any addiction, like a drug will go in, say meth, and it will mess up all three of those sort of pillars that operate in our brain to do many, many things. And so does high sugar ultra processed food. It goes in there, and it causes us. So the first one, the conditioning part, is we learn to basically, like, if we feel a reward from it, we learn to link sort of a craving and the behavior of eating to any time we're exposed to a cue. So I talked about the sourdough toasting. That's a cue. I
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
learned that that smell means go get a piece of bread or go get a cookie, right? Like, it's just a reflex. It's just all in my brain circuitry. It's just a this to this sort of phenomena.
Mhm.
The same thing, like you throw a bunch of whatever addictive substances at the brain, it causes the brain to get used to it. And then when that goes away, the brain goes into withdrawal, and that feels very uncomfortable, right? Because the brain's gotten used to having that around, and it feels like depression and anxiety. and then you use the substance again and it feels much better. I feel better, right? So, but it's initiated by the substance. Like the substance causes the brain to become more and more anxious, depressed. And
Right.
those
Oh,
those
yes.
neurochemicals. Yeah, exactly. And then third, the substance goes in and messes up our impulse control and our decision-making capacity. Like literally it shrinks our prefrontal cortex. It makes it not activate as, well. It affects the connections between the brain that regulate our behavior and help us sort of stay in control. And so to getting rid of the substance, all those things kind of go back to normal over time. That
Yeah.
those three problem circuits takes a little while, but those circuits kind of go back to normal, or
What's
where
the
they
second circuit? The title of the second circuit again?
I can't remember what, but like a stress reactivity, I think is what I
Thank
call
you.
it. The stress reactivity, which involves withdrawal. It involves sort of the trauma system, the trauma response
Yeah.
system. All of
Thank
those, sort of use the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, kind of interacting with one another.
you.
So
I'm glad you explained that because one of my questions that I was going to ask you is you had mentioned I had to give up honey, and I think you said maple syrup too. And I was going to ask you to talk a little bit more about why, brain-wise, that you had, what happens in your brain when you eat the honey to explain to the audience of why you had to give it up.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like sugar, sugar was an obvious one, and honey was just like one of those, like, oh, maybe I can at least keep the honey in kind of things, but it's not the same. Like, it is basically,
totally.
right? And it's the substance, what sugar does, just like what alcohol does, is it goes in and it activates the reward part of our brain and causes release of dopamine. And, and yep, exactly. And everybody thinks of it as like the pleasure neurotransmitter, which it is, but one of the kind of more important, in my opinion, roles that it plays is it teaches us to associate cookie with joy, or it teaches us to associate the smell of cookies baking with eating cookies. So it sort of sets us up to keep, it makes sense, right? Like we are what in the olden days when we were cavemen, like it made sense that we should learn to eat cookies whenever they're around. Like that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like we got to get our calories, right? And so but what it does in this environment is it makes, we've got cookies all over the place. And so it's a very powerful conditioner. And and then what happens is once we've learned this through repeated use of
Yeah.
cookies, is that when we walk into a bakery, that part of our brain, the striatum, just like is activated, dopamine is released, glutamate is released, and the behavior is so habitual. And so we feel the craving. A craving is kind of like a blocked impulse. Like it's like our body's like, I want to itch the scratch, right? Like it itches, I want to itch it. And and we don't itch it because we know we don't want to leave a scar or whatever. And we're left with a craving. We're left with a want that we cannot meet, right? And then we fight it all day and it's exhausting. And
It
finally our prefrontal
is.
cortex like just poops out and it's like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I asked that specifically about the honey because I wanted to correlate that to how tricky our addiction can be. Because for
Yeah.
Christmas last year, I had someone give me their own homemade honey from their backyard where they raise the bees and it's all natural and it's all this. And it was a small jar, but just this pure, honey, organic, whatever you want to call it, straight from the backyard here to your living room. I I thought, well, okay, I'll try it because it's so natural. I mean, that jar
Yeah.
was gone. I couldn't my solution was to just keep eating it till it was gone. Luckily, it was very, very small. But yeah, no
Yeah.
way. I can't.
Totally.
I can't.
Totally. Yeah. Like just because it's natural. And that was the same with the maple syrup. It's like,
Yeah.
and I had all these funny justifications. I'm like, well, maple syrup is more fructose than sucrose or glucose, I mean, and
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, ultimately in the end, It's basically, yeah, exactly. It goes in, it does the same, it activates dopamine,
Yeah.
it causes dopamine release in a way that, say, broccoli also probably causes dopamine release, but it's a much
Much
smaller
smaller.
degree of dopamine release. So it's not nearly as problematic for us.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned something that was very powerful. You talked about the example of going into the bakery, and I have a good friend of mine who's she's practiced in dietetics for her a big part of her career, but just has a lot of experience in behavior change coaching, and she'll talk all the time with clients about don't start a habit you'll have to break.
Yeah.
And if
Oh,
for her it's like I don't
Mm.
care what it is.
Yeah.
She's like, if you feel like a pull towards something that you again, just in that definition of that phrase, right? Feeling a pull towards something that probably tells you that something that
Yeah.
is probably going to turn into a habit. And she
Yeah.
said whether it's media or gaming or food related or behavior related, it's something. If you're feeling pulled, chances are if you start that habit, it's going to be hard to break. So
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
said your best chance at getting out is never getting in. So she
Yeah.
said, use the most um, options you have at your disposal is before
Yeah.
you even start it. So she said,
Totally.
try, and she used the example when I thought of the bakery thing. She lives in the Milwaukee area of Wisconsin, and I guess there was some nostalgic German bakery in her area that opened up like a satellite store on her way home from work. And she
oh
was
boy.
like, oh, this bakery is like the nostalgic German bakery that baked my wedding cake and
Yeah.
all those years ago. And I just want to go in. And it was like, it was that, conditioning, right? It was
Yeah.
conditioning. And then she noticed, no, 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 I'm good. Like I know what their stuff is. And that's nice. Right. And she was able to drive
Totally.
past it. And then she
Totally.
noticed a handful of nights over the next month. She was driving home from work and she was like, "Oh my God, like I am dying to go to this bakery." And it was like the stress reactivity, right? Like she was having something, she had the conditioning, stress reactivity.
Right.
And then she noticed,
Yeah.
she said, she never did. She didn't go in because she said, I would have a problem
Yeah.
Yeah.
with impulse control. She said, my
Yeah.
car would steer into that lot all the time
Yeah. For
if I
sure. For
started
sure.
it. And
Sure.
there
No.
it is. There's that 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. I had the same thing. Like there's a substance that I would purchase at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
And I could not, I mean, I still drive by Trader Joe's, but I really have a hard time going to Trader Joe's. And actually, they stopped carrying that substance, thank God, from what I can tell. Things are a little bit better,
I've
like-
heard that people say that about Trader Joe's. A lot of people have told me that. I don't have one nearby, so I guess
Yeah.
that's a good thing. But
Oh my God. And it was just like physical. I mean, I have patients with cocaine use disorder and they talk about, or, opioid use disorder. So use cocaine or heroin or whatever. And they talk about the street where they buy their drugs is like a really dangerous place for them to drive around because it causes craving. Or people say like they had to leave town because they could, the city in which they lived was a trigger. I'm like, I totally get that. Like for me, it's
yeah,
about certain stores, like certain areas in the store are very triggering. So yeah, I agree. I think there's just something, it's incredibly powerful. Oh, and I didn't talk about the other three pillars of the rewiring. So like we're
sure.
talking about one aspect of rewiring. So we talked about the food, those two things, right? Like we talked about eating enough and avoiding the sugar. And then you can do things that affect the brain wiring in each of those three pillars, the cue reactivity, slash conditioning part of the brain, the stress reactivity and emotional part of the brain, and the impulse control and decision making parts of the brain. And
Okay.
so for the cue reactivity, one key one is avoiding those cues, those things that light up your brain and make you want to eat sugar. So that would be avoiding driving by the Trader Joe's, avoiding
Right.
going to the bakery, right? Like avoiding going into the break room at work. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of, and there's a bunch of
Exactly.
other tools in the book, but that's, kind of pillar one. And then number two is the stress reactivity. So anything you can do to boost the functioning in your sort of mood and emotional and networks, in your emotional life is good. It's going to help you. So compassion is great. Building beautiful community is great. Getting outside and being happy and exercise is really great for all,
Yep.
for everything. Exercise does amazing things for both cue reactivity, emotional, sort of mood
Big time.
and impulse control. It does stuff at the dopamine. I mean, it really affects all the neurobiological systems in a positive way. Getting enough sleep, all that stuff is just all very, very important. Getting mental health help. I mean,
Yeah.
just it doesn't necessarily, I think mental health, like there's no problem with going. Therapy's beautiful. Like everybody
Yes.
should be in therapy,
Yes.
right? Like
I couldn't agree more.
and
Game
there's
changer.
nothing to be ashamed about at all. It's a wonderful thing to get somebody that, if you can afford it and if it's covered by insurance, heck, get somebody to help you figure out, help you make decisions, help you understand, validate you. I mean, it's just, we all deserve that. And
And in many cases, well, in my situation, and I know others the same, sometimes therapy is the only source in a person's life at that time that's
yep,
unconditional love and acceptance.
totally, totally. Yeah, I completely agree for all,
It's
for
important.
yeah, yeah. And relationships in life are complicated. And I know I've had a very hard time figuring out what a um good life partner looks like for me. I've stumbled through a lot of relationships and I'm now in a beautiful relationship with somebody. I mean, he and I aren't married, but was just super good. And I got, I chose well finally. But man, and I didn't know what that looked like. Like, what does it look like to have a good relationship with the opposite sex? For I'm heterosexual. And for me, and I was just I couldn't figure it out. So yeah.
Yeah. And what's the third for the impulse control?
Oh yeah, yeah. So there's several things that affect that brain circuitry. Again, exercise does restore brain function and improves impulse control and decision-making capacity. Um, and getting therapy that's focused on looking at those, like, so part of the impulse control problem is those justifications come in, right? So
Yeah,
like
old stories. Yeah.
and so the whole story is like, for me, one of my justifications was, well, food isn't addictive. That was like a justification for why I kept going back
Yeah.
to sugar. And so if you could, working with a therapist who can help you understand kind of where those um which are your justifications and which aren't, and doing what's a type of therapy called cognitive behavior therapy helps people
Hmm.
identify those justifications, look at them and sort of look at them under a microscope and say, is that
Yeah.
really helpful or is that a justification? Like, is this in your best interest
Yeah.
or is this a
Totally.
That's
justification?
right.
And
What role does community play in impulse control? I've noticed in my own recovery when I'm feeling, let's say I'm driving to a meeting
yeah,
and I want to go and I don't know, go into a store that I know has something that doesn't serve me, food
yeah,
it's not gonna align with my goals for recovery.
yeah,
um I'll tell myself if I'm going to a meeting, right? And it could be anything. It could be, like tonight I'm going to go to the library and local library and play card games. But
Oh,
on the way there, right, it's like, oh, I should stop. And then I'll notice right after the connection and community, I'll just drive home totally content and happy. And
yeah,
I'll ask myself, oh, if I'm hungry, well, okay, let's, not now it's time to have a snack, or now it's time to look at what I have eaten for the day and make sure I've eaten enough. But typically that impulse control, I've noticed,
yeah.
that issue goes away the
I know
minute that
that
I
is
have
so
connection.
true. Yeah, that's a great, I mean, I love that. Um, I, I don't know that I know the neurobiology of that, but I absolutely um relate to that. And I think it's a really interesting question, right? Like,
Mhm.
what is it about that going to a meeting and connecting with the community thing that
Yeah.
just like, what is the magic, but why? Why does that work so well?
I think the positive neurotransmitter release, honestly, it's that
Yeah,
serotonin, it's that
yeah, yeah,
norepinephrine, I think the
yeah,
positive neurotransmitters. I don't know,
yeah,
but
yeah,
oxytocin, right? Depends what kind of meeting you're
oxytocin
going
is what
to.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
totally.
I mean,
Yeah,
I have meetings, one of my recovery, I'm a active member in Al-Anon and in the 12-step community. And, I have friends in Al-Anon that I've known for now, 4.5 years. And there's always hugs, right? There's always hugs and love and connection after the meeting. And that's the only reason I go sometimes,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I guess I would posit, I can't remember where I put that in my book because I know I put it somewhere in one of those three chapters, but I would posit that I put it in the emotion regulation, like the emotional chapter, the stress reactivity chapter, because I
Sure.
feel
Well, that makes
because
sense.
that but I love the idea that it's doing something in the impulse control circuitry too. I mean,
I've noticed it. Yeah. And just
yeah,
in my
so
own
interesting. Yeah.
observation.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to take up any more of your time, but do you want to leave us with one? Jamie was talking about habits a minute ago. Do you want to leave us with one
Mm.
habit or tool that would be like leave the biggest bang for your buck for people that are wanting to get started or even are in the middle
Yep.
of?
Yep. Um, I guess I would say, I would say that I think one thing that has been really important for me is, and we didn't even talk about these yet, is sort of being okay with my body. A lot of us that
Mhm.
struggle with food is we just like, oh my God, I'm so ugly. This is me. I'm not saying anybody else thinks this, but I'm so ugly. I'm so fat. Like I need to, lose weight, and it's all because of my weight. And like now I'm at a weight where I'm like, in the past, I've thought like, oh, I want to be skinnier than I am right now. Now I'm like so happy where I am. Like I have no body image issues. And that's beautiful because now I eat enough too. Like I eat like good amount of food. Like I eat more than actually some people in, my family, like they kind of look at me like, that's a big breakfast, I'm like, yeah, I eat a lot. So I guess what I would say is eat enough healthy food and don't,
Take
restrict, don't starve yourself, like be like super generous when it comes to the vegetables and the, you know what I mean? Like, and the healthy proteins, like be there. There's no reason not to eat a lot of that. And if you make one change, that's a beautiful thing to start with. Just like load up your plate with like vegetables. You know what I mean? And just like get those nutrients and lots of different colors and types of vegetables. And I have a food plan in the book and all this stuff, and you can look at it and it's much more structured than what I'm saying right now. But just like be good to yourself and give yourself what your brain needs.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true because if you're getting enough healthy food, then the brain will just be,
Yeah. Just
it's sit back and relax, and it's not going to be
yeah,
all reactive all day with all this food anxiety that goes on for people that
totally.
are trying to starve to lose
Yeah.
weight
And the
or
weight will
try.
come off. It'll come off. I mean, when you get rid of it, when you finally get to a place where you're able to let go of the unhelpful foods, oh my God, the weight just like flows. I mean, you don't even know what happened. You're like,
Mhm.
why am I not eating? That at least was my experience is I'm just like, oh my God, if you're somebody who wants to lose weight and if that's important to you. And not everybody, I think our society overvalues weight and thinness way, way, way too much. And that's not what this
Sure.
is about at all. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Gosh, we really appreciate
Yeah,
you
very
coming. I
much.
hope you'll come back
Oh,
I'd
that's so
love
sometime and
that.
nice.
visit with.
Would you come back and talk to us again?
Absolutely. Yeah, it
There's
was
so
lovely
much
to
more
talk to
here.
you guys. Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. Maybe a couple
Uh,
weeks.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, we would love to have you back, and we've got your book written in the show notes for people to purchase. And if you want to know more about us and our online food addiction recovery program, you can find us at realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And our book is out on Amazon, Real Food Recovery. If food isn't the answer, what's the question? Thanks so much, guys. See you next time. Bye bye.
Take care.